Looks like the Redskins will be playing the Eagles week 1 in Washington, D.C. So we get to open up the season in Landover, which is dope. That may open the door to have Alex Smith maybe take the first snap, take a knee, and then get his congratulatory applause and everybody hype him up. So that can be his final snap of his career rather than him breaking his leg. So that would be dope. That opens the door for that. But now I'm about to dive into this matchup. And of course, I'm going to dive into each matchup as the schedule comes out. I'll probably just do a final video with all of them instead of doing videos for each one, but I definitely wanted to make week 1 separate because it's a little special. Just want to talk about some of the Eagles' weaknesses and strengths, some of the history we have going against them, some of the matchups that are favorable so far, that are not favorable. We'll see though, so let's get it. Alright, so first of all, we played the Eagles week 1 last year, so this is the second year in a row we're doing this. First of all, and in that game we were up 20-7 at halftime, and then it just went downhill from there, and the season was never the same. That was the beginning of a 3-13 season. That first half felt like, oh, this is a playoff team, okay, and then it just went so fast. I mean, Terry McLaurin was taking off. I don't know why Jay Gruden sat AP, but that should have been a big sign of all of the things that were to come of that season. It was a huge roller coaster ride. I mean, it felt like we were about to take the NFC East at halftime to by the end of the game, here we go again. And we didn't even know it was going to be worse than the previous season. Jay Gruden ended up getting fired. Bruce Allen ended up getting fired. Most of the coaching staff gone. An entire change to the organization. Front office, coaching, players, everything, and it really started week 1 when you really look back at it. That meltdown after halftime was a big foreshadowing for the rest of that season. The last time we played them was December 15th, 2019. We lost 37-27, and that game score was way closer than the actual game felt like it was, because by then the season was just all but done, and the Eagles had every right to fight for that NFC title to make it to the playoffs, which they ended up getting, even with all of the injuries they had. Shouts out to the Cowboys for underperforming with all of that talent. But that December 15th game, 37-27, doesn't fully encompass how much of a beatdown that was. It sounds like it wasn't that bad, but watching the game, it was that bad. But at the very least, the Redskins lead the series throughout NFL history against the Eagles, 86-79-5. So 86 wins for the Redskins, 79 wins for the Eagles, and 5 ties. And it's sad because the Eagles have a 6-game win streak on us. And if that continues, then they'll end up having the lead on the series. The last time we beat them was December 11th, 2016, when we won 27-22. I mean, this history has been dark recently. I mean, the Eagles beat us 24-0 December 30th, 2018.
When they ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
It's been dark for the Redskins these last few meetings against the Eagles, but I'm expecting things to turn around with this new Ron Rivera era. And I feel like we can attack a few of their weaknesses. One thing is their offensive line may not be as stout. It's still going to be really good. But Jason Kelce was playing hurt all season. I mean, he even played through a grade 2 MCL tear, a broken foot, and a torn elbow all just last season alone. And then Jason Peters is not back with them yet. He may re-sign with them, but even if he does, as much as I want him, he is 38 years old. And young, freakishly athletic guys like Montez Sweat and Chase Young can take advantage of his weathered down body. I mean, they might have been the only team last season more hurt than us. Their secondary was depleted, but they added Darius Slay, who can't guard Terry McLaurin. We already know that.
Is this your game?
And Nikhil Robbie Coleman to their secondary, so it should be better just naturally, even if players weren't getting hurt last year. If everybody in 2019 in their secondary stayed healthy the whole season, this 2020 secondary would still be better. Definitely more talented. Now, we took Ronald Darby from them, but he hasn't really been much of an impact since 2017, so it's not like the Eagles are really missing out on much anyway, especially 2019 wise. So even though their secondary has been one of their biggest weaknesses in the past couple of years, especially last year with all of the injuries, it may not be that big of a weakness this coming season, but nobody in that secondary can cover Terry McLaurin. I mean, nobody in the league really can. He was giving Stephon Gilmore the business, so I'm not worried about any Eagles defensive back when it comes to Terry McLaurin. We just got to see how these other guys do. I mean, Steven Sims started to show out those last couple of games of the season. He looked uncoverable. Kelvin Harmon has a lot of potential. Antonio Gandy-Golden has a lot of potential. And then there's other guys. So we just got to see how good our receivers are and if Dwayne Haskins progresses enough to be able to get them the ball. Because they can get open all they want, but if Dwayne Haskins can't get them the ball, and if the offensive line can't keep Dwayne Haskins clean, then it doesn't matter how open our receivers are against that secondary. And their defensive lines is one of their strongest units. Their linebacker core, especially like inside linebacker wise, is a little iffy, but that front defensive line led by Fletcher Cox is still crazy. They have a deep rotation, so there's always somebody healthy and energized and filled up, ready to go at all times in their rotation. So we have to make sure our offensive line is ready to deal with that. Hopefully Saahdiq Charles will be ready to be that Pro Bowl talent I believe he'll become by week 1. And at right tackle, it's probably going to be between Cornelius Lucas and Morgan Moses. More than likely Morgan Moses coming out the gate, but we'll see because I really like Cornelius Lucas. I'm very excited about his talent. He looked really good for the Bears last year. Very underrated signing. And then we more than likely have Wes Martin at left guard, Chase Roulier at center, and Brandon Sheriff at right guard. That's a top 10 offensive line if Saahdiq Charles ends up being as good as I think he would be. To me, he was the 5th best offensive tackle in this past draft, and the fact that we got him in the 4th round is a miracle in itself. I know a lot of teams were scared of his maturity issues, but they're really overblown. It's not that bad. So that's one of the biggest draft steals is the Redskins getting the 5th best tackle in the class, the 3rd most important position in football, in the 4th round, especially when the top 4 guys all went in the 1st round. He really shouldn't have made it out the 1st round, let alone the 2nd. So the talent is definitely there. And I feel like with this culture that Ron Rivera is setting up, I just can't see how Saahdiq Charles will end up getting out of line, especially if he wants to be great. But even if you haven't watched his film to agree with what I'm saying, just off of the fact that he was the starting left tackle for college football's most potent offense of all time, should let you know that he's definitely doing something right, especially in the SEC, against some of the best talent week in, week out throughout the season and in the playoffs. Also, one of their weak spots is their receiving core, even though they have a lot of talent. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, recently drafted Jalen Reagor. Still got to see if JJ Arcega-Whiteside will end up working out. So far, it doesn't look like it, but you never know. But their problem is injuries, man. All across the board. Not just the secondary, but the receiving group also. Because Alshon Jeffrey couldn't stay healthy. I don't even know how many games Deshaun Jackson played. Did he play even 5 of them? He's consistently hurt, so when healthy, which the Eagles will more than likely be week 1, that's when they're going to be at their deadliest because they have a lot of talent. They just have a lot of injury-prone players on their team. So we'll see how this goes. But their receiving core, which was like their biggest weakness and one of the things that all of the other 31 teams in the league were laughing at the most, especially with Nelson Aguilar, that's definitely like their biggest weakness. Don't forget they took Robert Davis from us. He wasn't really featured much, but he has a lot of talent, and I really hope we can somehow steal him back. But that receiving core definitely has talent, and our secondary will be tested. But hopefully our front 4 pass rush with Chase Young, a mix of Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Matt Ioannidis, and then Montez Sweat on the other end can get so much consistent pressure that Carson Wentz doesn't even have time to expose our untrustworthy secondary. And our secondary has a lot of talent also. It's a lot of untapped potential. Between Ronald Darby and Fabian Moreau, if they can stay healthy. Between Fabian Moreau and Jimmy Moreland to see if they can actually reach the potential that they have. And then Kendall Fuller is interesting because he's very good in the slot, which is what he's best at. But are we going to use him at outside corner, where he's not necessarily at his best? We're paying him outside corner money, so I'd be surprised if he doesn't play at least a little bit of it, but he's definitely better in the slot. And then Landon Collins, a strong safety, a dog, but he's a dog in the box. Zach Ertz out running a route is a mismatch against Landon Collins, but hopefully Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera can put their minds together to make sure that the appropriate player is covering Zach Ertz and not Landon Collins. Let Landon Collins work in the box and do what he does best. And then I hope that Sean Davis at free safety, if he's going to end up starting, his freakish athleticism can actually be used wisely and correctly by Jack Del Rio, which I'm assuming it will. Jack Del Rio is a defensive mastermind, and if anybody can get all of these high potential, high ceiling, boom or bust guys to actually work out, it's him. He's the mastermind. He's the evil genius on defense.
Excellent.
And I'm expecting a lot of these people to outplay their previous career stats and expectations, especially the defensive guys. And that secondary, like I said, should be looking pretty good with how deadly this pass rush is going to be. to keep pressure on Carson Wentz. That's another guy that's pretty injury prone, but he actually lasted all last season. And he played hurt quite a bit, but it was actually surprising to see him finish a season and make it into the playoffs healthy enough to play. But they drafted Jalen Hurts just in case if Carson Wentz gets hurt. But it's week 1. Like I said, this is when the Eagles are going to be at their deadliest, which is true for pretty much all teams. But it's especially true for the Eagles because they're so consistently injury prone. So expect to see the Eagles at their best. And like I said, probably their biggest weakness other than injuries is their inside linebacker group. So maybe Scott Turner can design an offense to attack that group. Also, their running back group is pretty interesting because they have Corey Clement. They have my boy Elijah Holyfield out of Georgia. Yes, sir. I was wondering where you went. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Mike Warren, and Adrian Killens. No names that scare you, but as a running back tandem, as a constant rotation, they could be pretty effective, especially behind that should be still pretty good offensive line. But again, like I mentioned earlier with Landon Collins briefly, my biggest worry is probably the Zach Ertz matchup because he usually is a matchup nightmare for us, especially on third downs. Statistically, he hasn't just killed us recently, but those random third downs where we have them 3rd and long and then Zach Ertz ends up getting the first down and then their drive continues and then they end up getting some points, whether it be a field goal or a touchdown, it kills us. You have to look back at that 3rd down play by Zach Ertz and note that that's what really ended up scoring those points for them, even though it was way earlier in the drive. So hopefully the Redskins can mitigate Zach Ertz's impact in that game. That's going to be one of the biggest keys. And like I said earlier, I think the second biggest key, maybe even bigger than the Zach Ertz key, is for them to get consistent pressure on Carson Wentz. And not just pressure, because when we've played Carson Wentz, we've actually been able to get pretty decent pressure on him, but I'm expecting more pressure. But the thing I'm really expecting out of this front 4 is to actually bring him down. These past few times we've gone against Carson Wentz, we've gotten in his face, we've touched him, but he's just escaped the pocket, escaped arm tackles, escaped hand grabs, and was able to make a play, usually for a first down or a touchdown. I'm thinking of some highlights right now in my head where we pretty much had him in our grasp, he escaped, and then just threw a bomb. So with Montez Sweat finally becoming who we hoped he would become those last few games of last season, I'm expecting that to carry on to this season. And with the best player in this draft, generational talent, Chase Young, I'm expecting us to actually turn a lot of those pressures into hits and sacks. Especially with our deep rotation of Ryan Kerrigan and, in my opinion, hopefully Nate Orchard coming off the bench as a healthy rotation. If for some reason you need to take Chase Young and Montez Sweat off the field, if you need to do that, you still have Ryan Kerrigan and Nate Orchard coming off the bench as a rotation to bring pressure. And like I keep emphasizing, make sure y'all get him down. Don't just get pressure and force him to move around the pocket and disrupt his game. You need to actually get him to the ground. And the good thing for us, Chase Young is a strip sack master. He has a tendency to hit the ball out of QB's hands. So even if he doesn't bring Carson Wentz down, he is really, really good at hitting the ball out their hand for technically a strip sack fumble. So even though that technically won't be him going to the ground, that is a fumble and potentially a turnover. So we have to shut down the tight end, Zach Ertz especially, and we have to get consistent pressure on Carson Wentz, and not only pressure him, but bring him down, take the ball out of his hand, whatever you have to do. But don't allow him to just escape sacks and throw bombs down the field like he's done to us these past few years. And then if healthy, this probably be one of the biggest tests for our secondary out of this entire season. So it's cool to see it week 1 to see how they really stand up against one of the most talented receiving units in the league when healthy. And like I said, which I'm assuming they will be since it'll be week 1 in the season. This will be an immediate test for them right off the bat. They got to cover Deshaun Jackson's speed, Alshon Jeffrey's size and route running, Jalen Reagor's route running, even though I still feel like they reached on him quite a bit by taking him when they took him. He's still a good route runner and definitely somebody we need to keep an eye on. But I'm excited about this week 1 matchup. Now we know who we can focus on throughout the offseason, the Eagles. Let's get it. And honestly, I feel like the Redskins can pull this win off with how much talent we have. I mean, we've always had talent, but now we've added even more talent. I'm expecting Dwayne Haskins to be way better than he was last year, even though he looked like a little something those last few games. But even with the talent that the Redskins have always had, they've always underperformed because of a underperforming coaching staff. Now we finally have a respectable, winning coaching staff that brings a winning culture. It's all about business type of culture. We're going to practice hard. We're going to play harder. We're going to prepare with urgency and energy. So I'm expecting us to actually be ready for games instead of those slow starts we used to get and we have to warm up and get right and then hopefully come out halftime and try to come back. I'm expecting us to be ready out the gate under this new Ron Rivera era. So I feel like the Redskins can surprise a lot of people with this win. I mean, you got to remember last season we weren't even as talented and we were up on the Eagles 20-7. Now hopefully if we jump out to a 20-7 lead at halftime this game, we won't blow it. But I'm very excited to see what this new Redskins era looks like. And the Eagles will be our first look at how this new Redskins team will look in 2020 and beyond. Because a lot of the people who are on this roster right now will more than likely be here long term. We have a lot of franchise guys in several position groups that we can build around, and I'm excited. I'm very interested in seeing how this linebacker group will shape up because that's probably the biggest mystery out of our entire roster. Who will actually end up starting or who will even make the roster linebacker group wise. So I can't wait to see how they shape up also when we go out against the Eagles. To just even see who's on the field on the first snap is going to be very interesting. Same thing with the running backs. If healthy, Darius Geis and Bryce Love should be the best running back duo in the NFL, but that's a huge if for the health part. So that can be a weird combination of one or two of them are not healthy. It might be Adrian Peterson, Antonio Gibson, and JD McKissick or Peyton Barber, or, you know, this week one will really show us how Ron Rivera feels about our roster and who he feels like should be the best players. Now, linebacker group wise, Thomas Davis should start week one just off of his veteran experience, but don't let him starting week one say on Ron Rivera's behalf that he feels like Thomas Davis is the best linebacker on roster. We have a lot of linebackers with a lot of potential. If you count Khaliki Hudson as a linebacker, Shondion Hamilton is the linebacker other than Reuben Foster with the highest potential on our team, I believe. Cole Holcomb is very fast. If he can improve his coverage, he can be a stud. And Reuben Foster, if healthy, should be the best linebacker in the NFC East at least. But that's if he's healthy. Then you also have dependable John Bostic. I love Ryan Anderson and Sam. I mean, he had like a 2-game span where he looked like a first-round pick and definitely looked worthy of that second-round pick finally. I think he was tied in the NFL in forced fumbles, and he didn't start until Ryan Kerrigan started getting hurt. So that just lets you know the potential that Ryan Anderson is finally tapped into. He's like an afterthought to a lot of Redskins fans. So I'm excited about this linebacker group, but I just want to see what it looks like week one. I'm very interested in how this will go. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a heavy rotation. There might be like a 5-man rotation where everybody has like an even amount of snaps. Even the first 3 guys out there may have the same amount of snaps as the other 2 guys coming into the rotation. But I'm very interested in seeing how this will work. And another thing, before I go, I'm really excited about Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Tim Settle, and Matt Ioannidis finally playing in a 1-gap system where they line up in the gap and their objective is to penetrate. That's it. Get to the backfield and disrupt everything. The past couple of years under Greg Minuski in the 3-4, they've had 2-gap responsibilities where their goal was literally to just take up blocks and take up space, not get pushed back, and allow the linebackers to get plays. No, no, no. In this 4-3, they're the ones that's asked to go in the backfield and make plays. So expect them to be as disruptive as they've ever been, if not more. Expect the best seasons out of all of the interior defensive linemen they've ever had, especially with Montez Sweat and Chase Young demanding so much attention. You don't have time to double team Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Matt Ioannidis, Tim Settle when you have Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the outside. Who you gonna pick? But I'm excited about this week 1 game, y'all. Just wanted to talk about that real quick. Of course, I'm going to be doing a video running through each game of the schedule. I'm not going to talk about each game in as much detail as this one. Well, it'll be the same amount of detail, but it'll be a little bit more summarized so that we won't be here for an hour with the whole schedule reveal video analysis that I'm going to do. But I'm still going to break down teams' weaknesses and strengths and all of that while we're going through the schedule. And of course, I'm gonna give my predictions on what our record will be. I'll probably give like a ceiling and a floor and what I feel like the record will be somewhere in the middle. So make sure y'all stay tuned for that later on today. But I appreciate the support, y'all. Make sure y'all like the video if you learned anything. If you liked it, please subscribe if you haven't. And I'll catch y'all later on today, actually. I'm out.